When a nosy HOA board member demanded the police chief leave his own pool, she had no idea she was about to learn a humiliating and much-needed lesson in humility. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. It was a perfect summer day at the Pinewood Estates community pool. The sun blazed overhead as families lounged and children splashed in the crystal blue water. Chief Marcus Johnson sat comfortably on a pool chair in the corner, deeply engrossed in his book while occasionally glancing up to watch his teenage son Malik performing impressive dives. Marcus was dressed simply in navy swim trunks and a casual t-shirt with Riverdale printed in small letters across the chest, nothing that would identify him as the town's respected police chief of 5 years. The peaceful afternoon was suddenly interrupted when Karen Weber, a woman in her 40s with blonde highlights and oversized designer sunglasses, began marching purposefully across the pool deck. She clutched a clipboard to her chest and an unnecessarily large Pinewood Estates HOA board badge gleamed in the sunlight. Karen had moved to the neighborhood just 3 months ago but had quickly secured a position on the Homeowners Association board, where she had developed a reputation for being overzealous about rule enforcement. Karen stopped directly in front of Marcus, deliberately positioning herself to block his son. "Excuse me," she announced loudly, causing several nearby conversations to halt. "I need to see your resident key card right now." Her tone was accusatory, and she made no attempt to hide her suspicion as she looked down at him with narrowed eyes. Marcus looked up calmly from his book and offered a polite smile. "Good afternoon to you too," he replied evenly. "Is there a problem?" He had encountered people like Karen before and knew from experience that maintaining his composure was essential, though a slight tension had already begun forming in his shoulders. "This is a private pool for residents only," Karen stated dismissively, her voice carrying across the pool area. "I don't recognize you and I know everyone who lives here." She tapped her clipboard impatiently, clearly expecting immediate compliance with her demand. Marcus sat up straighter and carefully set his book down on the small table beside him. "I've lived here for 5 years," he explained patiently. "My son and I use this pool regularly." He gestured toward Malik, who was now watching the interaction with concern from the edge of the pool. Karen's face tightened with disbelief. 5 years? That's impossible. I'm on the HOA board and I would definitely know if you lived here." She glanced over at Malik and then back at Marcus with increasing suspicion. "Did someone let you in? Residents aren't supposed to share their key cards with outsiders." The emphasis she placed on the last word hung in the air uncomfortably. Several nearby residents had stopped their activities to watch the confrontation unfold. Some looked embarrassed by Karen's behavior, while others seemed uncertain about whether to intervene. Marcus noticed the attention they were attracting and kept his voice deliberately calm and measured. "No one let me in," Marcus replied, reaching for the pool key card that sat next to his phone on the table. "I have my own key card because, as I said, I live here, 537 Oakwood Drive to be exact." He held up the key card but didn't hand it over, maintaining eye contact with Karen. Karen snatched the card from his hand and examined it closely, her lips pursed in doubt. "This could belong to anyone," she declared, handing it back roughly. "I'm going to need to see some ID that proves you actually live here. Otherwise, I'll have to ask you to leave immediately." She crossed her arms and tapped her foot, clearly enjoying the authority she believed she possessed. Marcus took a deep breath. "Ma'am, I don't typically carry my driver's license to the pool, but I assure you, I'm a resident. Perhaps you could check your resident directory. Johnson is the last name." His voice remained steady, but a muscle in his jaw had begun to twitch slightly. "That's convenient, isn't it?" Karen replied sarcastically. "Listen, we've had problems with non-residents using our facilities, and it's my responsibility to address that. Without proper identification, I'm going to have to insist that you and your son leave now." She pulled out her phone, making it clear she was prepared to call for backup if necessary. By this point, a small crowd had gathered nearby, watching the scene with varying degrees of discomfort. Malik had climbed out of the pool and now stood, dripping a few feet away, his expression a mixture of anger and embarrassment. Dad, should I go get, he began, but Marcus subtly shook his head, silencing his son. Actually, Marcus said calmly as he reached for his phone, I think I can resolve this quite easily. He dialed a number and put the call on speaker. Officer Rodriguez, this is Chief Johnson. Sorry to bother you on a Saturday, but I have a situation at the Pinewood Estates pool. Karen's expression shifted instantly from righteous indignation to confusion. Chief Johnson? She repeated slowly, her voice suddenly much quieter than before. Yes, Marcus Johnson, came the prompt reply over the speakerphone. Go ahead, Chief. What do you need? Marcus kept his eyes fixed on Karen as he continued. Nothing urgent, just wondering if you could swing by the community pool when you have a moment. I seem to be having some trouble convincing a new HOA board member that I actually live here. His tone remained professional, but there was an unmistakable firmness to his words now. Karen's face had drained of color, and she took a small step backward. You're the police chief? She stammered, her clipboard now hanging limply at her side. The badge that had seemed so impressive moments ago suddenly looked ridiculous. 20 years on the force, the last 5 as chief here in Riverdale, Marcus confirmed with a slight nod. And yes, I've lived in this community for all of those 5 years. My son grew up here. He gestured toward Malik, who was now standing tall beside his father, arms crossed. One of the residents who had been watching stepped forward. Karen, Marcus is not only a resident, but he organized the Community Watch program last year and hosted the neighborhood barbecue last month. You were invited but said you couldn't make it, remember? Karen's posture deflated as she looked around at the faces watching her. Some were shaking their heads, others were whispering to each other, and a few were clearly trying not to smile at her predicament. The authority she had felt just moments ago had evaporated completely. I was just doing my job, she attempted, her voice now uncharacteristically small. We have procedures for a reason, and I didn't recognize… I thought… Her excuses trailed off as she realized how they sounded. Marcus stood up slowly, standing at his full height. Even in casual pool attire, he carried an unmistakable dignity and authority. I understand wanting to protect the community, he said evenly. That's actually my job too. But there's a right way and a wrong way to approach people, and making assumptions based on appearances falls firmly in the latter category. Just then, Officer Rodriguez arrived, having been in the vicinity on patrol. She approached with a professional demeanor, but couldn't completely hide her amusement at the situation when she saw Karen's mortified expression. Everything okay here, Chief? She asked. Just a misunderstanding, Marcus replied graciously. Karen here is new to the neighborhood and takes her HOA responsibilities very seriously. We were just discussing the importance of proper introductions and community building. He extended his hand toward Karen. Maybe we could start over. I'm Marcus Johnson, your neighbor from Oakwood Drive and, incidentally, Riverdale's chief of police. Karen hesitantly accepted the handshake, her face still flushed with embarrassment. I'm sorry, she managed to say. I should have approached this differently. She looked genuinely remorseful, though whether for her actions or simply for the public humiliation was hard to determine. Perhaps this is an opportunity, Marcus suggested, addressing not just Karen but the small gathering of neighbors who had witnessed the scene. Next weekend, my son and I were planning to host a small get-together at our place. Consider this an open invitation to all our neighbors. It would be a good chance for everyone to get better acquainted. His gaze returned to Karen. Sometimes, community is built through casual conversations rather than clipboard interrogations. Several neighbors nodded approvingly, and a few even applauded the suggestion. Officer Rodriguez smiled and gave a small salute before heading back to her patrol car. Crisis averted. Malik grinned proudly at his father's handling of the situation. 1 week later, Marcus's expansive backyard was transformed into a vibrant, community gathering space. The scent of grilling meat and the sound of laughter filled the warm afternoon air as neighbors from all corners of Pinewood Estates mingled freely across his meticulously maintained lawn. Children darted through rainbow-colored sprinklers that Marcus had set up specifically for the occasion, their joyful shrieks punctuating the buzz of adult conversation. Strings of patio lights hung in gentle arcs overhead, not yet illuminated in the bright sunlight but ready to create a magical atmosphere once dusk descended. Marcus had spent the entire morning preparing, marinating meats, setting up tables and chairs borrowed from the community center, and arranging a thoughtful layout that encouraged interaction among people who, despite sharing the same community, had remained virtual strangers until today. Marcus stood confidently by the enormous stainless steel grill that dominated one corner of the patio, expertly flipping burgers with one hand while using the other to gesture animatedly as he engaged in conversation with a small cluster of neighbors. He wore a simple blue apron over his casual clothes, the words, "Trust the chef," emblazoned across the front, a Father's Day gift from Malik years ago. Despite hosting duties that would have left many people frazzled, Marcus maintained the same, calm, commanding presence that served him well both as a police chief and as a father. Every few minutes, someone new would approach, often tentatively at first, then with increasing comfort, as Marcus's warm smile and genuine interest in their lives put them at ease. He had a remarkable ability to remember details, asking Mr. Gonzalez about his daughter's college applications and reminding Mrs. Chen that he'd tried her recipe suggestion from their last conversation months ago. Malik moved through the gathering with the easy confidence of youth, helping younger children organize impromptu games and occasionally checking in with his father to see if assistance was needed. He had invited several of his friends from the swim team, and they now formed the core of an enthusiastic volleyball game that had attracted participants ranging from teenagers to middle-aged adults who hadn't played in years. The casual athleticism on display created natural conversation starters as neighbors cheered particularly good plays or laughed together at comical misses. Several people had commented to Marcus throughout the afternoon how impressed they were with Malik's maturity and inclusiveness, observations that filled the police chief with a quiet pride, far exceeding any professional accolade he'd ever received. As the afternoon progressed, the gathering had taken on a life of its own. What had started as Marcus's strategic response to an uncomfortable situation had blossomed into something organic and genuinely meaningful. Residents who had lived as strangers, despite sharing walls, discovered common interests and backgrounds. The elderly couple from the corner unit found themselves engaged in animated conversation with the young tech professionals who had moved in just months ago, a group of parents who had previously only nodded politely while rushing children to various activities now exchanged phone numbers, planning future playdates and carpools. The invisible barriers that modern suburban living often creates were dissolving in real time over paper plates loaded with perfectly grilled burgers and homemade sides contributed by attendees. Officer Rodriguez had arrived in plain clothes, bringing her family and a massive tray of her grandmother's famous empanadas that disappeared within minutes. She now sat comfortably chatting with several residents about the Community Watch program, answering questions and taking notes on concerns with genuine interest rather than bureaucratic obligation. Marcus had intentionally invited several other department members, all in civilian clothing, creating natural bridges between law enforcement and the community they served. The strategy was working beautifully. Conversations that might have been tense or formal in official settings flowed easily here, punctuated by laughter and the passing of condiment bottles. As the gathering hit its stride, the gate to Marcus's backyard creaked open, drawing a few curious glances. Karen Weber stood frozen in the entrance, clutching a large glass bowl of meticulously arranged fruit salad to her chest like a shield. She had arrived a full hour later than the invitation had specified, having changed her outfit multiple times, and nearly talked herself out of coming altogether. She wore a simple sundress, notably less formal than her typical attire, and had left both her clipboard and HOA badge at home. Her hair was pulled back in a casual ponytail, rather than the severe style she typically wore to board meetings, and she wore minimal makeup that made her appear younger and significantly less intimidating than her usual presentation. For several long moments, Karen remained rooted to the spot, surveying the scene with a mixture of anxiety and longing. The vibrant social tapestry before her, precisely the kind of community connection she had genuinely hoped to foster through her HOA work, albeit with drastically different methods, seemed to emphasize her outsider status. Several nearby guests noticed her arrival, and conversations momentarily quieted as they recognized the woman who had become infamous after the pool incident. Though no one was openly hostile, there was a palpable shift in the atmosphere, a collective holding of breath as they waited to see how this particular social equation would resolve itself. Marcus, ever observant even while engaged in multiple tasks, noticed Karen's arrival immediately. With practiced ease, he handed the grilling tongs to a neighbor and made his way across the yard, his path deliberate but unhurried, giving Karen time to compose herself while simultaneously preventing any awkward isolation. As he approached, he maintained an open, welcoming expression that held not a trace of the resentment or smugness that many in his position might have felt justified in displaying. The yard had grown noticeably quieter, dozens of eyes surreptitiously watching this interaction while pretending not to. "Karen," Marcus greeted her with genuine warmth, extending his hand in welcome. "I'm glad you decided to come. That fruit salad looks amazing. Did you make it yourself?" His voice carried just enough to be overheard by those nearby, a subtle but clear signal that Karen was to be treated as a welcome guest, not as a pariah. Karen shifted the heavy bowl awkwardly, her typical confidence conspicuously absent. "I wasn't sure if the invitation still stood for me," she admitted quietly, her voice barely audible above the background noise of the party. "After what happened?" She left the sentence unfinished, the events at the pool hanging between them like an invisible barrier. Her eyes darted nervously around, noting how many people seemed to be watching the interaction from a distance. Marcus took the fruit salad with a genuine smile that reached his eyes, the weight of the bowl transferring, between them becoming an unintentional metaphor for the burden of tension being lifted. "Everyone deserves a second chance," he said firmly, loud enough for those nearby to hear clearly. "Besides, a community is built on working through difficult moments, not pretending they don't exist." He gestured toward the elaborate spread on the tables. "Find a spot for this masterpiece, and then I'd like to talk to you about something." Karen carefully placed her contribution among the other dishes, meticulously adjusting its position until it aligned perfectly with the other platters, a small remnant of her controlling nature that brought a hint of a smile to Marcus's face. As she straightened, he guided her toward a slightly quieter corner of the yard, offering her a glass of lemonade from a nearby pitcher. The simple courtesy seemed to loosen something within Karen, and her shoulders relaxed visibly for the first time since her arrival. "I've been thinking," Marcus began, his tone conversational but purposeful. "The Community Safety Committee I've been trying to establish for the past year needs someone with organizational skills and attention to detail. Someone who cares enough about this neighborhood to take action, even when it's uncomfortable." He paused deliberately, allowing Karen to process his words. "Your approach at the pool was problematic, but your underlying concern for the community wasn't wrong." Karen looked genuinely stunned, having clearly expected recrimination rather than an invitation to collaborate. A complex mixture of emotions played across her face: relief, confusion, and something that looked remarkably like hope. "You want me on your committee?" she clarified, her voice betraying her disbelief. "After I treated you that way? After I made those assumptions?" Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes our worst moments can become catalysts for our greatest growth," he observed. "Your attention to detail and commitment to rules could be invaluable if channeled constructively. But," he continued, his expression growing more serious, "it would need to be paired with compassion, cultural awareness, and the understanding that safety means different things to different people in this community." The implication was clear. This wasn't just forgiveness. It was an opportunity coupled with accountability. Karen's eyes glistened with unexpected emotion. She blinked rapidly, fighting for composure in a public setting. "I'd like that," she replied with unexpected humility. "And I want you to know, I've been doing some serious thinking this week about my assumptions, about how quickly I judged you based on..." She struggled to find appropriate words. "I'm sorry, truly. It was wrong on every level." Marcus considered her apology, noting the genuine remorse in her expression. She wasn't simply embarrassed about being wrong. There was authentic reflection occurring. "The best apologies come in the form of changed behavior," he said finally, his tone gentle but firm. "Words matter, but actions matter more." This committee would be a chance to demonstrate that change, to help build bridges instead of barriers. He extended his hand again, this time as an offer of partnership. "Are you interested?" Karen accepted his handshake with visible gratitude, the formality of the gesture somehow perfect for the moment. "Yes," she said simply, then added with unexpected vulnerability, "I don't have many friends here yet. I thought the HOA position would help me meet people, but I think I've been going about everything all wrong." Marcus's expression softened further. "Now, would you like to meet some of your neighbors? Properly this time, without clipboards or interrogations?" There was a gentle teasing in his tone that transformed what could have been a painful reminder into something almost companionable. For the next hour, Marcus skillfully guided Karen through various social clusters, providing thoughtful introductions that highlighted common interests or experiences she shared with other residents. "Karen's background in urban planning might be helpful with that garden project you mentioned, Richard," he would say. Or, "Didn't you mention you were looking for recommendations for gluten-free bakeries, Susan? Karen was just telling me about one she discovered downtown." With each introduction, he provided context that positioned Karen as potentially valuable to the community rather than adversarial. Gradually, the stiffness in her interactions began to dissolve, replaced by tentative, but genuine connection. From across the yard, Malik observed this remarkable transformation with growing admiration. At 16, he had initially argued against inviting that racist lady to their home, frustrated by yet another incident where his father had to prove his right to exist in spaces where he belonged. But watching now as his father methodically transformed a potential community division into an opportunity for growth, Malik understood he was witnessing a masterclass in leadership and human psychology. The ease with which Marcus navigated complex social dynamics while simultaneously grilling perfect burgers and ensuring everyone felt welcome demonstrated why he had risen through police ranks so quickly despite institutional barriers. It was a different kind of power than what Malik had initially understood strength to be, subtler but ultimately more transformative. As evening approached, the natural light began to fade, and Marcus clicked on the patio lights, casting a warm, golden glow over the gathering. The atmosphere had shifted from the initial energetic socializing to something more intimate and reflective. Small groups had formed across the yard, conversations deepening as neighbors discovered unexpected commonalities. Karen now sat comfortably with a group of women who had initially regarded her warily, contributing to a discussion about community gardening possibilities with genuine enthusiasm rather than regulatory concern. Officer Rodriguez approached Marcus as he finally took a moment to enjoy a burger of his own. "Pretty impressive transformation," she noted quietly, nodding toward Karen. "A week ago, I was half expecting to arrest her for disturbing the peace. Now she's planning butterfly gardens with the garden club ladies." Marcus smiled, watching the animated conversation across the yard. "People are complicated," he observed. "Sometimes they just need the right conditions to show different aspects of themselves." He took a thoughtful bite of his burger. "Besides, the community needs to see that reconciliation is possible, that we can address bias directly without destroying each other in the process." As the evening progressed toward its natural conclusion, residents began to depart, many lingering to express gratitude to Marcus for bringing them together. Several mentioned plans for future gatherings, book clubs, game nights, walking groups, sparked by connections made that day. The spontaneous community building exceeded even Marcus's strategic hopes for the event. When only a few guests remained, Karen approached Marcus as he cleaned the grill, volunteering to help with the substantial cleanup effort. As they worked side by side, she spoke without looking up from the plates she was collecting. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't been the police chief," she admitted quietly. "If you had just been an ordinary resident without that immediate proof of belonging, Would I have ever recognized how wrong I was? Marcus considered her question seriously, appreciating the depth of reflection it represented. We'll never know, he acknowledged. But recognizing the question itself is significant. The work of overcoming bias isn't a single moment of revelation. It's an ongoing practice of questioning our assumptions. He closed the lid on the grill. The first community safety meeting is Thursday evening at the community center, 7 o'clock. We'll be discussing how different perspectives on safety can sometimes conflict and how to balance various needs. I think your perspective would be valuable. As the final guest departed and twilight deepened into true darkness, Marcus and Malik stood together on the patio, surveying their yard now scattered with the evidence of a successful gathering. The father draped an arm around his son's shoulders, a quiet gesture of affection between two people secure in their bond. You know what impresses me most about you, Dad? Malik said suddenly, looking up at his father with genuine admiration. You could have humiliated her completely that day at the pool. You could have made today about proving how wrong she was. But instead, you found a way to make it about making things better. He shook his head in wonder. I'm not sure I could have done that. Marcus tightened his arm around his son's shoulders. The measure of our character isn't how we treat people who've been kind to us, he said quietly. It's how we respond to those who haven't been. Remember that when you're in positions of authority someday. He looked out over the peaceful neighborhood, lights glowing in windows that now housed people who felt more like neighbors than strangers. Besides, sometimes the most powerful response to prejudice isn't anger, it's excellence and grace. That's something my father taught me, and his father, before him. As they gathered the last of the chairs, the summer stars emerged overhead, bright points of light against the darkness. The awkward pool confrontation had transformed into something unexpected, a genuine opportunity for community growth and personal reflection. One tension-filled interaction, handled with wisdom and restraint, had created ripples that would continue to influence their community in ways none of them could fully predict. The night settled softly over Pinewood Estates, wrapping itself around homes where neighbors now knew each other's names, preferences, and stories. And in one particular house, a humbled HOA board member sat at her kitchen table, rewriting community guidelines with a new awareness of how rules could either divide or unite, and a newfound commitment to ensuring they would do the latter.